Welcome to the Confused Wanderer. My name is Todd, and before we get into today's reading, I want to give a little context for what you're about to hear and why I think it matters. This episode features an article I found during my research into Lauronite Yaddick and the long-running allegations surrounding the Cassiopaea SOT community, going back to the early 2000s. Finding this piece was not easy. I ended up going deep into internet archives, digging through old snapshots, dead links, and forgotten pages that are difficult to access unless you know exactly what you're looking for. And this article didn't show up by itself. I recently hit a much deeper layer of information in my research, a level of documentation that started expanding the picture in a way that made a lot of things clearer. It began to connect patterns, claims, and experiences in a way that suggests there's much more going on behind the scenes than most people realize. I've been digging into this for a long time, and the process has not been linear. There were many times I hit a wall, had to step back, and then come back to it with fresh eyes. Every time I returned, more pieces started to fall into place. This article was one of those pieces, and reading it in the context of what I've uncovered more recently made it hit even harder. When I found it, it was an eye-opening read. Not because it gave me one final answer to everything, but because it captured something important, the pattern. It echoed concerns that many other people had already been noticing, describing, and in some cases personally experiencing in their interactions with this group. The article you're about to hear is a critical essay written by Benjamin Buehne in 2013. It reflects the author's perspective and claims based on his own research and experiences. Whether you agree with every conclusion or not, it's a valuable document because it shows how people were analyzing this group in real time and what stood out to them strongly enough to speak publicly. For me, this kind of archival material is important because it helps build historical context. It lets us compare narratives, track recurring themes, and better understand how certain warning signs were being interpreted by outside observers over the years. And I also want to say this up front. There is much more to come. What I've been uncovering goes beyond archived articles and forum posts. I'll be sharing more documentation, more context, and accounts from insider ex-cult members about their experiences. That material takes this into a different category entirely, and it has pushed this research into a new depth for me. So as you listen, I'd encourage you to do what I always try to do in this research. Pay attention to the patterns, compare it with other accounts, and think critically. This is not about telling you what to think. It's about putting source material in front of you that may help you see the bigger picture for yourself. So let's get into it.
Let's be honest. Most men are told there are only two ways to train: lift heavy or grind harder. But what if strength isn't just about how much weight you can throw around? What if real strength is control? At Fusion Body Studio, our Bar for Men program is built differently. This isn't a dance class. This isn't fluff. And it's definitely not easy. This is precision strength training, small movements, deep muscle activation, isometric holds that light up your legs, core, glutes, and shoulders in way traditional lifting misses. You'll shake, you'll sweat, you'll discover weakness you didn't know you had, and then you'll turn that into power. Bar builds lean athletic muscles, core strength that protects your back, mobility that keeps you training longer, and joint stability that prevents injury. It complements heavy lifting, improves sports performance, it strengthens your foundation. Because strength without control, that's incomplete. Our bar for men classes are designed specifically for the male body. Tighter hips, stronger upper bodies, different movement patterns. We train smart. This is about longevity. This is about resilience. This is about becoming strong in every range, not just at the top of a lift. If you've plateaued, if your joints are tired, if you want to build real, balanced athleticism, now's your time. And hey, women can absolutely do it too. Use code AYA20 and get 20% off your first 6 months at Fusion Body Studio. 6 months to rebuild your foundation, 6 months to move better, 6 months to redefine what strength really means. It just takes one click in the description box below using AYA20 at checkout. Fusion Body Studio. Train with control, build real strength. Now back to the show.
The title: A Case Study in Cult Fallacy, Cassiopaea, SOT.net, by Benjamin Buehne. Written Friday, January 11th, 2013. I recently, due to my studies in psychopathy, came across a person stating I should join an online forum. It would seem to make sense, as I had submitted an article to SOT, Sign of the Times, regarding psychopaths, and this was run with generous editing that I had not been completely happy with. The forum is for Cassiopaea.org and the Cassiopaean experiment. And this forum's members and leadership run SOT. Because of their interest in psychopaths, I decided to look further into this. What I found was a potentially dangerous group, led by a potential psychopath, in a place of enlightenment, not quite able to see the forest through the trees. I debated with myself a great deal in regard to writing this article. The MO of this group seems to be to destroy the career and reputation of anyone getting in its path. However, since a few articles I have on Conscious Life News linked to SOT and the work on psychopaths done there, I feel that it is a duty to put a warning out there regarding this group. The final decision was made to write it after noting a particularly dangerous, unaliving element. If me writing an article and, as a result, bearing personal attacks could potentially save a life, then the effort is worthwhile. Let's face it, volunteering to become a target of a doomsday cult is not my brightest idea. The writing is unfortunately on the wall as you read through multiple comments from people waiting to embrace the destruction of the earth through a rash of comments. I also considered making this multiple articles due to the length of this one. I opted to keep it cohesive so as not to appear to go back and forth between this group and myself as I roll out future articles after their inevitable response to this one. Further compelling me to write this article is the target audience. They are seeking to recruit from people interested in alternative news. This coincides well with the audience here, which means that this is the community that needs to be warned about this group, and I would encourage those reading this to further spread this warning. Disclaimer: the views here expressed are my own. I had contacted the editors of Conscious Life News prior to running this, and it is being run with some reservation. This can come across as one alternative news site attacking another. I truly do not seek to call into question the information on SOT or the forum, but rather the methods of some of the individuals involved there, as well as the danger I believe they may pose to others. Now that I have clarified some things, let's get into the meat of the article. What is SOT? One of the first things striking me when researching this group was a link on their front page titled Testimonials. It's an odd thing to put on the page of this forum. When clicking on this, it takes you to Cassiopaea/cult.com, which ends up being a page dedicated to proving that this Cassiopaea is not a cult. It proves to be the equivalent of someone saying, hey, I don't want to sound racist, but, because the next thing they say is going to be extremely racist. In similar fashion, upon further investigation, this group seemed a great deal like a cult. Let me back up. What is SOT? SOT seemingly serves as a recruitment tool in the guise of an alternative news website. I can say that the members of this forum there do some strong research and publish interesting articles in a few areas. Some of the titles: Puppet Masters, which are articles showing population manipulation; Society's Child, articles showing acts from psychopaths; Secret History, articles showing anything refuting the current view of history; Science and Technology, interesting science and tech news; Earth Changes, Fire in the Sky, Health and Wellness are just some of the titles of the sections that they offer articles on this website. Nothing strange here, right? It's similar to many alternative news websites, but with a couple strange quirks that will be explained later in the article. You can also find books on this website, mostly published and written by Laura Knight Yaddick. There is also a link to the forum on the SOT website, and that takes you directly into the Cassiopaea forum. Once in there and posting, after agreeing to the terms and conditions, you'll be encouraged to buy and read all of Laura's books. You'll also be encouraged to read the entire forum before participating. What the forum members were unaware of is that I had done a good amount of homework prior to starting anything and had started topics to challenge certain things, essentially trying to give them a chance to prove themselves not to be a cult. Explaining the Cassiopaean experiment belief structure. To explain a bit about the Cassiopaean experiment, it was started in the early 90s by Laura Knight Yaddick. And I'm just going to pause right here for just a second before I continue to read the article. Just to make it clear, Laura did not start the Cassiopaean experiment. It was Frederick Ireland who started the Cassiopaean experiment in the 90s. Laura, for a while, was just an observer. She was never the one who started the Cassiopaean experiment. It wasn't until between 1999 and 2000 that Frederick Ireland stepped away. And then Laura Knight, through force and lawsuits, had taken over all the previous transcripts that were taken during the time that Frederick Ireland was involved and started the Cassiopaean experiment. So, just wanted to put that out there. Now we're going to continue with the article. What was the experiment? Laura got herself a Ouija board and believed herself to be a channeler. She eventually channeled beings calling themselves Cassiopaeans. Cassiopaeans are supposedly Laura Knight Yaddick, but future Laura Knight Yaddick. Laura now lives on a planet in the constellation of Orion in a different density without time, but from the future, and is sending messages to Laura and Laura only, even though there is more than one Cassiopaean, because her wavelength is just right in helping her because she asked for help. The Cassiopaeans and Laura Knight Yaddick have become good friends, often joking with each other. They have also clued her into a few scientific facts that they know, which we don't. Although strangely, Laura always seems, strangely, to have known about these topics before being told about them by the Cassiopaeans. However, Laura is not by any means unskeptical. She frequently writes about her skepticism, but then always seems to convince herself that the Cassiopaeans were right by recalling things she had already read. She also gets convinced because the Cassiopaeans offer predictions as proof of their knowledge, and a tab is kept of the correct predictions. Strangely, one is not kept of their misses, which is an extensive list. After all, they correctly predicted the end of the world, December 21st, 2012, but that wasn't really a miss because the date was changed to 2014 now. Those saying the world would end December 21st, 2012 were mocked. Maybe we should go a bit into the belief structure that then arose from this new religion founded by Laura Knight Yaddick from the future. The belief is that there are 7 levels of density, and we exist within the third. And let me stop here again for just a second. So obviously the author here wasn't aware of the raw material. And so Laura, nor Frederick Ireland, for that matter, came up with the whole density system. That came from the raw material. So the author is going to get into this little section where he talks about the densities and what the Cassiopaeans or Laura think about where we are in the evolutionary path and where we eventually go and things like that, which Laura did not come up with, nor did Frederick Ireland. This is all stuff that came from the raw material that the Cassiopaeans are also talking about. So I just wanted to put that note in there that the author is not necessarily familiar with the density system and how we're in third density and so on and so forth. And so, and that's fine. He's skeptical about this. And I think that in him reading over the Cassiopaean material and him being a part of the forum for a limited period of time, these concepts were new to him. And he thought that these concepts were just coming from the Cassiopaean material. So I just wanted to make sure that we were on the same page with that, because he gets he's a little skeptical about this. I don't think that he's ever heard of this terminology before or heard of these ideas in regards to the different densities and service to self, service to others, and so on and so forth. Okay, let me get back to the article. The belief is that there are 7 levels of density and we exist within the third. At the third level, we have a service to ourselves. In other words, we think about ourselves and the things we do are for ourselves. At the fourth level, there is both service to self and service to others. The fifth level is for reflecting while moving between levels, a place before incarnation. At the sixth level, you no longer reincarnate and you have no physical existence and are only service to others. The seventh density is everything combined. Time doesn't really exist in these higher densities. Here's the thing though, there are these things called Lizzies, which are a kind of alien, and they control these other aliens, which are Greys, and basically engineered man to be oblivious to just about everything so that we can be eaten. If that were not bad enough, these Lizzies can also take other humans, organic portals, kind of like in the Matrix movies, just to keep us blind. On top of that, there is the issue of psychopaths, directly from the source. Laura says, the Cassiopaeans have said that a psychopath was a malfunctioning organic portal. This is different from the forces of fourth density service to self, or the human elements deliberately working on service to self polarization. Although they may, in many instances, look the same. The service to self polarizing beings would seem to have more discipline and conscious control and not have the flakiness of the psychopath. However, they are a higher grade of the same theme, as it were, and not better, simply more together and smarter. There is hope though. You could get yourself ready for the fourth density because the end is nigh. All you have to do is everything Laurinite Yadic says. You see, a bunch of meteors, along with hungry aliens, are headed towards Earth, and with it will come a wave that can transform those who are ready to move into fourth density. This third density Earth will be destroyed, but the fourth density Earth shall live on, and there it's going to be tougher for you to be eaten. In the meantime, it's recommended that you chain smoke, because Laura said it makes you taste bad to aliens, and eat lots of fat while cutting out any carbohydrates, sugar, vegetables, or milk. In order to prepare for fourth density, you would follow the teachings of Gurdjieff, at least the ones Laura decides are relevant, in terms of trying to wake from a state of sleepwalking. In that way, the religion blends in elements of the fourth way, at least the mind control portion. If you want to learn more about this, or want to say if I'm actually speaking the truth here, you could find more information at the Cassiopaea.org website. It should now be clear why they cover the topics they do on SOT, particularly tracking meteors and comets. The point of this article is not the start of religious war. Religion is open for interpretation, and I can't say for certain that any of this is not true, nor is it relevant to what I intend to write. I simply wish to provide a reader a Cliff Notes version of their beliefs to give context to the threads presented. Next section, author's forum entry and purpose. At present, I am banned from participation at this forum, a result I fully expected upon joining it. This is because I created a series of posts designed to create certain dissidents and bring contradictions to light, logical fallacies observed from afar. The forum did not disappoint in their reactions to these tests. For me to access this, I would need to re-register. And as I see this as dishonest, I will leave this up to any readers to search this out and find. But also within the newbie section is a significant post by me. I will go into this later. If one wishes to point out the irony of me not wanting to be dishonest, but then point to my investigation, I would point out an earlier post of mine involving me stating, while you feel individual new people out, I feel you out. As I see what there is to learn here, and as I am tested, you are tested. I would say this shows that I am testing them and finding out what there is to learn in no uncertain terms. Let's break things down. The overall goal was to allow them to disprove their anti-cult propaganda. This would be done by showing several things. First, Laura and the Cassiopaeans are the only valid source of information. 2, alternate information and sources are suppressed and censored. 3, the environment is highly controlled with a hierarchy and reporting structure. 4, doublespeak exists through a different language. 5, an indoctrination process exists to cause emotional distress. 6, they seek to create a new identity for you. 7, isolation from friends and family is a goal. 8, seeking to dominate one's time exists. 9, there exists several unspoken rules and harsh punishment for violation. In other words, this is a place with a few specific people that seeks to control the minds of the people ensnared. As such, this is not a place where anyone can find enlightenment of any sort, as enlightenment, although subject to debate, implies direct knowledge and thus freedom for you. One cannot have enlightenment while being separated from the source and having vicarious knowledge. It is a place that will mimic enlightenment for those there. They are fooled into believing they have become enlightened because they have altered their perceptions. For one who has not previously experienced enlightenment, such drastic changes in the self may seem similar to what others describe as awakening. Next part. Logical fallacies overview. Before proceeding, I should point out the logical fallacies used to combat my questioning. Probably the most common is the straw man argument, answering a different question and ignoring the exact question asked. Beyond that, many questions are just not replied to. These are both ways of evading questioning. The next most common is the ad hominem. They attack the poster or sources, which are arguments to irrelevance. A source really can't be considered when determining the relevance of information. There is a good amount of bandwagon fallacy and groupthink. In other words, we all. While consensus tells you something, in reality it best reflects the control of thought as opposed to who actually has the best argument. It's an informal poll of public opinion. In addition to these fallacies, you see what could only be described as bad science. Confirming information is highly regarded. Information against their beliefs would be dismissed. It's the opposite of the scientific method and could be a case study in confirmation bias. Read through their material and you are guaranteed half of any argument. While they may not come out and say some of this stuff, it is the action and reaction that says it all. The evidence, part 1. Laura Knight Yaddick and the Cassiopaeans are the only valid source of information. Within this thread, I plainly ask, to what degree can we take a fundamental supposition from Laura or the Cassiopaeans and question it, even ones with evidence? This question was asked, and a few minutes later, Laura jumps in with an answer. Laura says, "You have to read it to make any fundamental suppositions, and it is evident to everyone who has responded here that you haven't done that. If you had, you would be asking different questions." Another response follows a few minutes later from an administrator. "Ben, we've already been over this. You really do need to read most of the base materials before you can decide what is and is not the foundation. Seriously, it's just due diligence." What does the administrator mean by "we've already been over this"? I would say that this is going to reference, for the most part, this thread. Within this thread, I am encouraged over and over again to read the Wave series by Laura. How important is this to participation on this forum? Quoting one of the admins, "Focus on learning for now. Until you learn, you cannot contribute in any real way, as is blatantly obvious in this thread." Laura later chimes in, "I have had to work very hard to study, to develop, to expand my knowledge base of the language I am attempting to translate. I'm not perfect, no one is, but I give it my best, and I submit myself to the network to catch errors. When some new data comes in and suggests that changes are necessary, I am willing to make those changes. I don't feel that I have to be right all the time, and I certainly do not insist that just because the C's said it, it must be so. In fact, as I have often said, if the C's say it, it needs to be checked." Of course, one would be hard-pressed to find areas in which the network has corrected her. Instead, she is corrected by the Cassiopaeans, and one must then wonder if these are in fact outside of her, or if she simply manifests Cassiopaean material to correct herself when she is in need of correction. So let me just stop here for just a brief moment and just add, it's interesting that this author has already been picking up something that I believe is a fact. Laura Knight actually is not channeling anyone, in that she's fake channeling the Cassiopaeans. That's what it seems like to me, and it's obvious that this author is also picking up on this fact. Okay, let me continue. Thus, it is not those in the group that correct her, but the Cassiopaeans, who only she can communicate with. When pressed about the inability of others to communicate, she has stated, "Actually, you are behind the times on your science. The more rare an event, the more information it carries, and the more valuable it is to study it with the understanding that it may not be replicable." Immediately afterwards, Laura then goes on the attack, questioning my open-mindedness. What we can gather from these interactions is as such. The ability to interact on this forum is dependent entirely on knowing the Wave series and accepting this information. The original thread's topic was chosen for a specific reason. It's because it almost entirely agrees with Laura's positions with slight variations. However, the explanation goes outside of explanations given by Laura. The result is the discord, which you can now read. It caused a crisis for those on the forum reading it, because it provided an alternate possible framework of explanation of the same data they had been studying, but it's outside of Laura's world. It really doesn't even necessarily contradict anything. It's just outside the framework. The reaction serves as the proof that Laura is the only source of information on the forum. This is the logical fallacy of an appeal to authority and is equally invalid as the ad hominem fallacy because, again, information in an argument is either valid or invalid regardless of the source. The evidence, part 2. Alternative information and sources are suppressed and censored. This is possibly the easiest to prove. This is an entire forum dedicated to what essentially amounts to slander. Here they cut down other sources of information. There is also a subsection for New Age COINTELPRO. Further, there is another known as baked noodles for people they deem crazy. The Cassiopaean definition for COINTELPRO, disinformation/psychopath, should be one who brings up contradictory information to Laura's. The process seems to be one identifies contradictory information. Research is then done to find evidence of imperfection of this source. The source is then discredited. Reading through the discussions, the group will actually strongly defend the ad hominem fallacy as valid when pressed. Quoting a moderator, the source is never ever irrelevant. In fact, the source of any information is vitally important. If you would have read any of Laura's work, you'd have picked up on that because the strength of her work is that she follows the sources of information as far back as she possibly can and notes and analyzes the influence on those sources of information since they necessarily influence the validity of the information. Now let me just pause right there for a second and add a little bit of commentary here before I get back into the article. It's really interesting that Laura, or a moderator for that matter, is saying that it's relevant to actually look at the sources, the people that are putting out certain information. Because in fact, when you go back and look at Laura as a source in regards to the information that she's putting out, there's holes throughout her whole history that seem fabricated. There's many times, and I'm eventually going to do some shows on this, many times where it's obvious that she's fabricated her history in regards to the research she's done, in regards to how the Cassiopaean experiment started. She rewrites history in the sense that she basically writes out how Frederick Ireland was the original, the OG in regards to channeling the Cassiopaeans. She would make you believe that she did all of this prior research that brought her to the point of actually engaging in the Cassiopaean experiment, which is absolutely not true. So if we go by her own methods of how she vets out certain sources of information, and that the person that's putting out the information and who they are is relevant, then that would actually disqualify Laura and the information she's putting out as being relevant. It would actually make Laura irrelevant, because if you look at the character of the person, Laura, putting out the information, you would understand that she's been not so honest, pretty much blatantly has lied, rewritten her history, written other important characters in the history of the Cassiopaean experiment completely out of the picture or smeared them. So in that sense, that would disqualify any information coming from her. So let's get back into it. Quoting Laura, "This is one of the fatal beliefs that amounts to critical correction and is discussed in political ponerology." Translated, critical correction is the belief that others are similar to you and think like you. For example, we may believe that others like to watch sports because you do and can't comprehend others that don't. For Laura, this means we assume psychopaths are not evil because we are not evil. She has convoluted this to mean that psychopaths, when identified, allow her to completely discredit anything this person has ever said. Thus, one of her favorite labels to lay on someone disagreeing with her is that of psychopath. While I agree with her on the fact that knowledge of psychopathy is vastly underreported and that many do not understand that psychopaths think in a fundamentally different way, I must disagree with her criteria for and diagnosis of psychopaths. In fact, in this thread, after my banning so as to silence my defense, yours truly was diagnosed as a psychopath by her and several admins there. The criteria used, my refusal to accept her on authority, as well as saying I wanted to help them, signified pathological narcissism. I will not defend against such accusations. Rather, I would point you to the list of identified psychopaths according to Laura Knight Yaddick. Just about anyone with a disagreement with her is one. And even if I am one, I can say more than likely one of these hundreds of people is more than likely not one considering her criteria. One would thus need to postulate if this criteria is so loosely defined by her for the explicit use of the ad hominem fallacy. Even if you prove to them that you are not a psychopath, they could fall back and say that you are an agent. In other words, the lizard aliens hijacked you for a bit to make you act this way. That's actually sort of funny because both Bryce and I had someone claim that we were agents sent to attack Laura. Let me move on. The evidence, part 3. The environment is highly controlled with a hierarchy and reporting structure. If you do decide to register with this forum, you will see in the newbies section an introduction by a member named Nova Creatura. Under this I did something I assumed would get an immediate response, and this did not fail. I said hello, and then I offered to answer any questions they may have. A response was seen almost immediately from Laura. On whose behalf? She asked. I requested clarification. I never got some from her, but I did from another moderator. I apologized for overstepping my authority. She told me that there isn't authority, but that there is authority. This authority is the moderators, but they aren't really authority, even though they are. I'll tell you what authority was not, according to a moderator, and that was me. I was firmly put in my place. Let's take what the moderator says, though, and apply it. The only authority is the mods. The mods' behavior, it should be clear, defends Laura as much as they can. It appears that Laura would then be at the top of the pyramid, as if that's not obvious yet. There is also the action of the mods, which censor in several ways. When searching through SOT, one would also find the list of editors, which clearly shows a hierarchy of editors. Those at the top just so happen to also be the top moderators on the Cassiopaea forum. First of all, they edit heavily after the fact. They remove things that were previously in posts when the true colors show. They change the titles of threads. If you thumb through enough of it, you see it. Second, they hijack threads. You'll notice in a few of the threads I posted, users other than moderators did discuss the subject at hand. However, a legitimate discussion was impossible with the moderators' ad hominem attacks and off-subject remarks. Third, they ban, and they ban often, and for reasons not clearly stated in their registration agreement. In fact, there is a thread in the newbies forum with a rather condescending tone to anyone that had been bad. Don't ask why. They don't need to give reasons. Rule 5. We, the moderators, reserve the right to do anything and everything we see fit to ensure a friendly, comfortable environment for our guests. That includes deleting you and all of your posts if you break any of these rules or act like a psychological deviant at any time, present, past, or future. Oh yeah, people, I said future. Tom Cruise has nothing on us. That's an interesting Scientology reference. It seems to show that some of them know what they are. Let me help clarify the criteria. Are you going along with their brainwashing? Good, continue the post on the forum. Are you resisting? You shall be banned. Did you further know that the moderators have a separate private forum that they use to discuss things? One more final test. I had friended several members and decided after the fact to write to them regarding the interaction. In all fairness, I had observed that this had previously happened with this member. He did not disappoint. My Facebook post, as well as private messaging in Facebook, ended up in the discussion. I should point out that I did a similar action with one of the moderators on Facebook. This did not end up in the discussion, although it was possibly discussed in the private forum. The evidence, part 4. Doublespeak exists through a different language. Words defined by Cassiopaean. In this thread, I was told twice to build my vocabulary. Cassiopaean jargon, if you will. Going back to the article on mind control, you could see similar jargon to the loaded language used. Empty your cup, they say. Your cup is full. This is them telling me to be open-minded and accept the wave material as fact. They call me arrogant, but really, this is them saying that I think for myself. The illusion of self. I don't really exist. Only the group does. So come on and join in. A few examples of doublespeak are when I was told that it is a research gathering forum and trying to remain objective. Objectivity is called into question. But then we get this from Laura herself. Laura says, obviously, you aren't aware of the fact that the mainstream scientific communities around the world have been co-opted by power politics for a very long time. And this is just one of the symptoms. So indeed, the remark is as arrogant as I perceived it. So we are to be objective and have one point of view, but she has this different perception, and this is okay. This is in specific reference to a discussion as to the words psychopath and sociopath being interchangeable. I state that it is used that way in the scientific community at large, even though it shouldn't be that way. This is her explaining that even though it is, me saying it is, would be arrogant as she perceives it, even though perception and subjectivity is frowned upon. This is a rule that does not apply to Laura. I would also state that a good example of doublespeak is a specific moderator's instance that there is no hierarchy or authority there, but then basically telling me to get back in my place at the bottom of the pyramid right after this. Evidence, part 5. An indoctrination process exists to cause emotional distress. One of their favorite things to do, in particular for new people, is to mirror. You could look up the term in the Cassiopaean. Mirroring can be an effective tool in the right hands. In the wrong hands, it's an excuse to criticize. If you have seen the movie Fight Club, there is a scene where they discuss that in order to get into Project Mayhem, someone has to stay on the porch for days and you should go out and insult them. At one point, there are 2 people on the porch. Someone comes out, you're too fat, and you're too clearly not being able to think of a good criticism outright. Blonde. This is what will happen. And the enforcer is a woman named an art. A newer member observes, perhaps turning LCD upside down would give people some time while trying to read to work through it before their tongue gets better of them. But that is an art's fault. The beast, I like to call her, since she gets right to the point of the matter most of the times. No small talk from her. And what I have noticed is that many people who come here don't separate information and emotions, which is needed for this kind of forum in the first place. And when they are confronted with their own illusion, pain comes in buckets, a whole loads of buckets. And what do most people do? Well, like every cell in the body does, they run to the comfort part of themselves that they know, never staying for the learning part of the experience. That could be true for a valid mirror, but an art has a particular pattern. It seems every new person there is arrogant and bullheaded. Isn't it strange that this is the mirror for every single person? On top of that, just about anything known about that person will be shown back to them as a fault. In other words, as a new person, everything about them is wrong. Yes, what an art does causes pain. It's criticism of any and everything about a person. This is intended to break someone down so that they are more dependent on any praise given from the group. Only through a method can this inherent wrongness and art will point out be changed. It just so happens they have a method, and it can be seen in the introductory post to just about everyone. There you could be told what to think, how to act, what to eat, where you could get valid information, and who you could trust, mostly Lauronite Yaddick. The food you will not eat according to them: carbohydrates, sugar, gluten, milk, and vegetables. You should also be smoking as much as possible. Doing well? Great. How would you like to move to France to live with Laura in her compound? The evidence, part 6. They create a new identity for you. Let me give you a quote from First Initiation, required reading if you are to stay on the forum. Try for a moment to accept the idea that you are not what you believe yourself to be, that you overestimate yourself. In fact, that you lie to yourself, that you always lie to yourself, every moment, every day, all your life, that this lying rules you to such an extent that you cannot control it anymore. You are the prey of lying. You lie everywhere. Your relations with others, lies. The upbringing you give, the conventions, lies. Your teaching, lies. Your theories, your art, lies. Your social life, your family life, lies. And what you think of yourself, also lies. But you never stop yourself in what you are doing or in what you are saying because you believe in yourself. You must stop inwardly and observe. Observe without preconceptions, accepting for a time this idea of lying. And if you observe in this way, playing with yourself, without self-pity, giving up all your supposed riches for a moment of reality, perhaps you will suddenly see something you will have never before seen in yourself until this day. You will see that you are different from what you think you are. You will see that you are two. One who is not, but takes the place and plays the role of the other, and one who is, yet so weak, so insubstantial, that he no sooner appears than he immediately disappears. He cannot endure lies. The least lie makes him faint away. He does not struggle. He does not resist. He is defeated in advance. Learn to look until you have seen the difference between your two natures. Until you have seen the lies, the deception in yourself. When you have seen your two natures, that day in yourself, the truth will be born. Dying and being reborn. This is the goal. Not that this is necessarily bad in all cases, but I'm showing that it exists within the teachings here. It's actually all over. And it is a necessary part of the mind control discussed earlier. As they like to say, you can't change the way you think with the way you think. The evidence, part 7. Isolation from friends and family. There is something that is a major sign, as most major religions will teach you of the importance of family. Let's see what those at the Cassiopaean forum will say. Marital conflict, children and the work. Sex, romantic love, and the work. Registration is required for these. Isn't that odd? Many former members report being advised to leave their husbands and wives. The evidence, part 8. Seeking to dominate one's time exists. What you'll see is that you are constantly encouraged to read before participation. Here's the thing. The list of material could take a year to get through. Do you have time? I hope so. The Wave series alone is 8 volumes. That's right, 8 volumes long. It's also mind-numbing, tedious, and full of logical holes. By the time you would be done with that, you would have forgotten all about these logical holes. Now, as you go in there, you could ask questions. These questions will not be answered. You'll be told to read. It goes beyond just the wave series. In order to participate in the forums, they'll want you to read the entirety of it before participating. If you are not encouraged to leave your loved ones, they'll want to leave you with the amount of dedication it will take to get through all the material. You see, that's what reading is. Questions could be answered, but they are not, because the desired result is you reading and thus your time being occupied. As your time is occupied, you are dedicating yourself to it. This is an investment in these beliefs. As you invest time, you have to justify this investment. You justify it with belief in it. Should you think you have it all read and have time to come up for a breath, Laura is coming out with more to read. She also has some on the recommended reading list she could toss at you to occupy your time. Wait, what are you doing reading? You should be working on the work. Quoting a moderator, if you think this forum can be of some value to you, then at least take the time to do enough research on and reading of what is on this forum before attempting to question the fundamental underpinnings of what we do. It has taken all members here many years to formulate our collective and complex understanding. You think you have it down pat in a couple of weeks? 8 volumes of Laura's discussions with herself in the future, along with reading the entire forum in 2 weeks? What more reasonable request can be made of anyone? Let me just tell the work I won't be coming in for a while, and making my daughter lunch will have to wait too. This request was later echoed by another moderator after saying I was displaying a stunning level of arrogance and cluelessness. The evidence, part 9. There exist several unspoken rules and harsh punishment for violation. Let me introduce you to one odd remark from this moderator. We don't private message here, Ben. The discussion should take place in full public view. That way, others have an opportunity to learn from it. I believe this moderator is being truthful here. But what are others learning? After all, the private message system exists for a reason, and the mods have a private forum for discussion. They can certainly learn, can't they? My assumption, because this happened directly before I was banned, was that the lesson truly was for the others there and not the mods. It was for the other posters on the forum, and the lesson was similar to the lesson learned by putting someone in the barracks or a public execution. The lesson, this is what happens. It's not pleasant, and you don't want this, so don't break the rules. What are the rules? Don't question Laura or the Cassiopaeans. Submit to the moderators. Be agreeable and don't argue. Learn, do not teach. Criticism is for newbies. Know your place in the hierarchy. Don't talk about the hierarchy. Don't admit to anything indicating we are a cult. Trust the people on the forum and not the people on the outside. These are the basic, unspoken rules of any cult. You are told that this is a research forum and that it is there to build consensus, not to start debate. Say that you are there to contribute, which would be both give and take. You are told that this is a tug of war. You are told to keep quiet and read. Receive information and don't give it. You can think of other things you can give. Elaboration on the fallacy in this group. Let me show you how the fallacies and biases of this group ultimately reflect upon their thought process at this time. I'm going to choose the topic of psychopathy, as almost any cult leader is a psychopath, and show the product of distortions. For this, I will use the example of myself being labeled as a psychopath, and compare myself to what is known about Laura Knight Yaddick, preferencing this by stating that the point is not to definitively show myself or Laura as either a psychopath or not, but to show the error in judgment pervasive through the group as a result of the mind control techniques used. The gold standard for determining the psychopaths from everyone else is Robert Hare's checklist. Factor 1, personality, aggressive narcissism. Glibness, superficial charm. I can say that I was accused of speaking unclearly often. On the other hand, Laura professes her years of study into the art of pervasive writing technique. Grandiose sense of self-worth. This is probably the thing they most cited, making the forum believe me to be a psychopath. I said I wanted to help them, and as such, because they explained they are above my help until I read everything, would be grandiose. But am I a megalomaniac? I would make this charge on Laura after reading this transcript. So here he has a clip from a transcript taken from the website. The Cassiopaeans say, if you know why, you will anticipate and possibly make mistakes fatal to yourself. Let us just say that they know that harm to you would result in their own total destruction along a more negative timeline. And Laura asked the Cassiopaeans, well, if my death would bring about their destruction, then maybe it would be a good idea for me to check out, right? Well, isn't that what we want? And then someone else in the group asks, why would it lead to their destruction? And the Cassiopaeans answer, again, we cannot tell you all, but know that there is no chance for a positive outcome for Earth and the future without the presence. And Laura asks, so there's no chance for a positive outcome without me, and yet my unaliving would ensure their total destruction? And the Cassiopaeans answer, and all else. And then Percival asks the Cassiopaeans, maybe it's got something to do with balance, you know, the universe wanting balance. There's a higher power in the universe that allows things to play out as long as there's some kind of balance. But if you weren't here, referring to Laura, then this would be a completely dark, negative star, and there'd be some mechanism that would destroy it and everything associated with it. And the Cassiopaeans agree, yes. And then Laura asks, what's really depressing though, to think that we are the only balancing energy out of 7 billion people on the planet? Percival says, the only reason that the whole thing hasn't already gone up in smoke is because some few people are making an effort, referring to themselves, I would assume. It's rather magnanimous of the universe to consider such a small group of people. And Laura adds, how did we get off on this topic? And someone else chimes in, oh, so that's why we all feel so bad, because we're being harped, meaning, you know, direct energy weapons. And Laura says, oh yeah, so is that what's behind our various negative experiences of late? And that's been kind of rotating around the house like some kind of bug being passed around? So let me pause for a second. What I gather here is, and this is from sometime, I traced this from the transcripts back to, I think it was 2011. So this is well after Frederick Ireland had already left the group. And so I suspect that Laura is not channeling and that she's just pushing the planchette around. And what Ben is trying to bring to our attention is that within this conversation with a quote, Cassiopaeans, Laura talking to herself from the future, is that she is saying or claiming, or the Cassiopaeans, if you want to say it that way, are stating that Laura and her presence here on the planet is what is saving the entire planet from total destruction. And this goes back to what Ben is trying to explain here, trying to show us, is that Laura is the one who has the grandiose sense of self and who is the megalomaniac. And so while she's running around pointing the finger at other people claiming that they're psychopaths, it's actually Laura that is fitting in to all the criteria laid out what diagnoses someone as being a psychopath. So let me get back to Ben's article here. So we just got done with reading over the Cassiopaean transcripts, and now it says pathological lying. This is not something I have been accused of. Laura has been accused of defrauding people in a raffle, as well as advising a member of her group to lie to the police to get her husband falsely imprisoned. And let me pause there for a second because I'm going to get into that, of why she was investigated by the French authorities in the first place. Goes back to Laura and her group of moderators on the forum privately pushing one of their members to falsely accuse her husband of abuse. So anyway, let me move forward. Conning and manipulative, lack of remorse or guilt. While I apologize for things, a dual search on the forum for Laura and the word sorry produced no hits. Shallow affect. Genuine emotion is short-lived and egocentric. Those on the forum will not be able to tell this about me. But here is an interview with Laura, and I will let you be the judge. So with that being said, I'm just going to pause here for a second. I'm going to leave a link in the description box where you could go back and follow the link. This is an archived blog of this gentleman, Buehne's. Throughout the article, Buehne has links to certain posts that Laura has made or certain articles that Laura has made that you could go back in and read those posts and judge for yourself. So here he's saying that he's leaving a link to an interview with Laura and that you could read that interview and you could be the judge if she has shallow affect, any genuine emotion. Callousness, lack of empathy, failure to accept responsibility for own actions. See the above article regarding the fraud, as well as this insight about her role in advising a member to lie to the police. So these links will be down. The link to the main article will be down in the description box. And then within that article, you'll find all of these links where he is pointing you to examples that you could check out for yourself. This article would be way too long if I read through all the subsequent articles that he's directing us towards. So just for time's sake, you want to do your own research, then I would suggest clicking on a link to his article and then following those other links and read the articles that he's pointing us to. Factor 2, case history, socially deviant lifestyle, need for stimulation, proneness to boredom. I again wouldn't say the group would be able to tell either way with me, but for Laura, I would point to the pile of books pictured here. And he's giving a link to all these books that obviously she's bored. And so that's why I guess she would be a voracious reader and why she reads all those smut books that she recommends everyone else read. Parasitic lifestyle. I work for a living. Laura writes and largely makes a living off of donations and book sales, mostly to members. Poor behavioral control. The group would have you believe that I was rude in the forum. Laura, however, was quite controlled. I guess I would win that category. Lack of realistic long-term goals. I do have these long-term goals, but I'm not certain the group would know this either way. Laura does as well. She anticipates being transformed in the wave in 2014. That's funny because it's 2026, so I guess the wave is being delayed. Impulsivity. There really isn't much evidence of this for me on this forum. To this, I will defer to Laura's decision to, as she puts it, raffle her house in Florida. And there's going to be more on that later, the whole house raffle scam. I'll do some reading on that in the future. It's a big one. Irresponsibility. There is not much evidence of this for me on this forum. I will defer to the previous page, explaining her role in advising a member of her group to lie to the police. At no point in time is responsibility taken in her writing. I've read about the whole situation with Laura and her cult members pushing this woman to turn her husband in on false claims of abuse. It was hugely eye-opening to read the accounts and what was going on behind the scenes. And this is what led to the French authorities doing that long investigation on SOT, Sign of the Times, as well as their forum. And Laura and the people surrounding her were all brought in for questioning for months. So let me move on. Juvenile delinquency. There is no evidence of this for me. For Laura, there is this excerpt from her website. Laura was attacked by a man when she was a teenager, defended herself, was accused by the man for attacking him, tried and found not guilty. This is in response to the question, was Laura convicted of attempted unaliving? I do not know the details of this incident. If you follow the link, you'll see the file was destroyed. However, you don't often see attempted unaliving trials for clear cases of self-defense, which makes you think that there would be more to the story. In order for there to be a trial, there has to first be a hearing to determine if there is sufficient evidence to warrant a trial, and in this case, there must have been. Makes you wonder. Early behavior problems. There is no evidence of this for me on this forum, but for Laura, there is this excerpt from her autobiography. Laura says, "At first, I had straight A's, consistent scores in the top percentile on every test, awards for essays, and regular contributions to school newspaper. I gradually become a withdrawn, angst-ridden rebel without a cause who refused to participate in class or turn in homework. I was failing in school. My teachers were concerned. The principal was concerned. My mother was advised I had a problem. Revocation of conditional release. There is no evidence of this for either of us. So why then does the forum at large believe me to be a psychopath, or at least a malignant narcissist, with little suspicion of Laura? To explain this, we need to dive into how this group had previously believed others to be psychopaths and the mindset of some of those currently in the group. The evidence that this forum would cite against me is as such that I had not read the material, which is not true, and I had demonstrated this to them, that I felt I could contribute, help, and teach without reading the material, that I had questioned them and their authority, and that I had acted in a combative manner. I had right man syndrome by not submitting to their beliefs. The reader can decide if my actions consisted of acting inappropriately for themselves. It seems to be more along the lines of accusations of a side of a disagreement, any side, and would fit aptly to any discussion where there are 2 points of view. Not much of this seems to fit the criteria for a psychopath. So why then do they believe that it does? Why wouldn't this criteria be applied to Laura? And I agree with him here. Why wouldn't it be? It should. Truly, the subjectivity of who is right and wrong is the key differentiator here. And certainly this is simply criteria that could be applied to either side of any disagreement. The answer can best be explained with looking at common mental traps. The first thing you need to understand is that their minds have already decided that Laura is right and that this point of view is the status quo. The longer this continues and the longer they bring in and see evidence be a confirmation bias, the more overwhelming any evidence must be in order to unseat the status quo. In addition to this, because of the above process, we will protect our earlier choices and ultimately see what we want to see. and that we are prone to believe ourselves to almost always overestimate our abilities. When you combine this with the bandwagon fallacy that they all reinforce these same beliefs, you have a confabulation of mental traps that is close to the equivalent of a mental black hole, as it is almost impossible to escape it once you have fallen into it. This is at the heart of cult fallacies. You see, through the years of Laura's leadership, the group has encountered a great deal of contradictory beliefs, leaders, and people. When you understand Laura, even though she projects as if she will admit to being wrong and redirect, this will rarely happen in regards to the Cassiopaeans, and at that it's only to correct timelines. This is something that doesn't happen. So when contradictory beliefs spring up, they need to be explained away. Perhaps more research is needed so as to bring in more confirmation bias, and is only wrong under our current beliefs. Maybe data is only true in regards to a specific subset. Most probably, in their minds, the study/data is only being put out there by either psychopaths or reptilians under the guise of COINTELPRO in order to throw them off the truth. Laura realized that the best defense is a good offense, and her logic is currently impenetrable to the group. You see, psychopaths and reptilians don't like when regular humans learn the truth. So when you enter material contradictory to the truth, their truth, the reason behind it is because you have been exposed to this wrong information. Quoting Laura says, obviously, you aren't aware of the fact that the mainstream scientific communities around the world have been co-opted by power politics for a very long time, and this is just one of the symptoms. At first, you are given the benefit of the doubt that you were just under the influence indirectly of reptilians or psychopaths. If you continue the push, you will either be an agent run by a reptilian or a psychopath. Both in terms of what you should look for are very similar. Who decides what scientists have relevant data and which ones have irrelevant data? Laura does. Why? Because she knows the truth. And the status quo is that she is not a psychopath. Thus, the ways in which she fits the mold will be ignored. So what happens if you don't accept the truth of Laura? Well, this is obviously because of an overinflated ego, an almost pathological overinflated ego. If you think you may know more than Laura, this mindset is, again, not evidence of Laura's overinflated ego. If you have the gall to actually state that you can teach anyone anything that is not based on Laura's teaching, you have crossed the line and are no longer almost pathological. You are pathological. Should a pathological person be listened to in their mind? No, because they don't want you to find the truth and will mix truth and lies. Laura obviously wouldn't do that though, because she is not pathological, as was previously decided, and regardless of any evidence to the contrary. Besides, only the pathological person would not accept the conclusions of that many forum members. The bandwagon fallacy, because of an overinflated ego, which is why disagreement is not allowed, right? The purpose of the forum is to gather research, to reach a consensus of the truth from Laura. I hope it is clear how the various fallacies work together to create a cohesive network of mental traps, essentially setting up the black and white thinking seen from the forum members. Explanations have been warped so that the actual criterion for pathology is ignored, while certain observations or small portions of the criterion have been overinflated in a manner in which the criteria for a psychopath or agent fits anyone that disagrees with the ultimate appeal to authority, which is Laura. And this only works because of the assumption that Laura and the Cassiopaeans and the consensus of the forum are correct. This is how the author has been viewed as a psychopath by this group in spite of fitting very little of the criterion, at least as far as the forum would know, while Laura, with a solid case that can be built showing she may be one, is immune from examination. Don't get me wrong. I am certain that the group is busy gathering whatever information they can so as to prove that their analysis of me is correct. They may even find some things because I do lack perfection. They are friends with me on Facebook, which is how I was encouraged to be drawn in, and will comb through things looking for evidence, as is their MO, in their typical style, the epitome of confirmation, which puts the cart before the horse and then tries to prove it's correct. In fact, they will probably view this article as evidence. The explanation being that my pathological narcissism couldn't handle the rejection by this group. They will forget that I predicted being removed from the forum and that I expected this. Also, Laura has written about and addressed many of the concerns I list in terms of her fitting this criterion. Never mind if her explanation of these events fits what has been noted regarding the speaking style of psychopaths when being questioned about crimes committed. I again will leave the conclusion to the reader, as the article is already long enough and this breakdown would be irrelevant. The view from a newbie. Let me help you understand how people get indoctrinated into this. They search on the web on a given subject. Let's say it's the fourth way. Cognitive sciences, psychopaths, COINTELPRO, UFOs, Israel, hidden history, media manipulation, or really anything in the esoteric realm or alternative news in science. Ghosts, Bigfoot, Bermuda Triangle, you name it. You may stumble across SOT. You may join a group on Facebook with one of the members or a different forum. This commonality would attract you to talk more. The life of one searching for valid information on these subjects can be tough. You don't come across that many knowledgeable people in any of these areas. Those on the forum are knowledgeable in many of these areas, searching through and finding information in various areas and bringing back the pieces fitting their specific puzzle. It's refreshing to find people that can discuss this and have found disinformation. It can give you a sense of connectedness and community you would otherwise lack. You can identify, and for some, you want more. You could go to try to participate, but wait, there is something you are not getting. And Art, who's a moderator, is criticizing, and you don't really understand what this is about. But many others are nice. You are baited into an argument, and you lose that argument because, being human, you have flaws that exist. In reality, an Art doesn't have this right to criticize, and you shouldn't have to defend yourself from such an attack. You are told you need to be humble, and you really just don't know as much as you thought. And here is some stuff to read to make you more intelligent and worthy of conversation. You are humbled and receptive, and you read, and you see some of the points, and you see what you want to see, and you see the stuff that makes sense to you and what drew you in, and you also take in some other stuff. A lot of this may be new to you, but some of it won't be, and hey, it can kind of make sense. You keep reading and reading. Evidence is presented, and it seems scientifically sound. An entire case is built. In the meantime, others are wondering just what you are doing with all your time. You try to explain some of it, but it is looked at with ridicule by your family. It's painful. You believe at least part of it, but those on the forum understand. This continues and causes polarization within you. You agree more and more with the complete picture offered on the forum and agree less and less with your loved ones. You are eating a really odd diet. Your loved ones question. You are told this is a program for them. They are defending their inner ego, and that's why they are doing it. It's not really discussed. You don't want to discuss it with them anymore. And besides, you don't have time. Eventually it hits you. They may be psychopaths or agents. It's going to be tough for you to awaken while you're around them. They are keeping you trapped in your current way of thinking. Don't worry though, you'll be accepted still by those of the forum. You could even join in these groups they have. Maybe even go to France to live with Laura and help with this research. Every so often you get wind that something may be off here, but it's ignored as you read more and work on your programs. You see foolish people every so often on the forum questioning. You see what happens to them. This forum is what you have now. This is your life. Questioning means your life. You submit, you are invested, and you protect your investment. This is the new you. And going back to the old you means giving up all this progress. It's a trap you've been warned about. Laura told you about the urge to do this and how wrong it is. Laura, so smart, so all-knowing, so lucky to be guided by the Cassiopaeans. What a shame this planet, most of which don't understand, will be wiped away soon. But I will be one of the few saved, thanks to Laura. It's not a cult. I wouldn't join a cult. I'm too smart to join a cult. They just don't see. They haven't read everything. What is a cult anyway? Who gets to decide? Are cults even bad? They are not. Being part of them feels good. You are told that very few can truly awaken, and you are one of the elite. You pity everyone else, not part of it. The problem. To some reading this, it would sound dumb because you could never get sucked into this. Those on the forum, it sounds dumb to them for different reasons. It sounds dumb because I'm oversimplifying. You really all should read about 300,000 pages of material to truly grasp it, and cherry picking, however they wish to justify it. They see this as an attack on them, not a warning to them. They see me as attacking their religion, and religion is a large part of who we are. It's an us versus them scenario, black and white thinking. Unless you are one with the forum, you are an outsider and should not be trusted. There is only one trusted source for this information. Every so often, one of those on the forum defect, and this is explained away through black and white thinking. They are now one of them, not us. What the initiated won't see is that the information is highly biased. Contradictory information, when presented, is dismissed. Yeah, that's scientifically valid information, but could never apply to Laura and the work we do here. It's the appeal to authority all over again. This is true, but Laura is so special that there is no risk with her. After all, she learned hypnosis on the streets, not at some university. It's biases like this that is not seen. While I appreciate the work this group has done on psychopaths, a work I hold in high esteem, I feel that sending anyone to this group is like recommending people to buy a car at the most crooked used car place I know. Once understanding the reason behind their work into psychopaths, so that they could discredit anyone they wish, it seems that the work is a silver lining to their cloud. All the same, should I not recommend looking into the research in these areas would be the same ad hominem fallacy this forum taught, as if it's not a fallacy at all? In fact, the group has done great work in a few areas. They have collected information that questions current history and paints an alternative view towards many things we hold as fact. Some of that may prove legitimate. All of it would be a silver lining to the cloud. The fallacies the group holds dear are too much. Take the good information and dispose of the rest. Don't submit though. Don't bow to the demands. Don't give your free will to any other human. The fallacies in this place, virtual and physical, are numerous. Confirmation bias is the entire point of the forum. Confirming what the Cassiopaeans say and ignoring the numerous misses. If information contradicts, then attack the source of the information. Hold one true authority in Laura. I mean, the Cassiopaeans. Both ad hominem and authority are arguments to irrelevance as the source has nothing to do with the validity of the information. Gain free will through submission. Not speaking something means it is not true, right? Hey, the whole group thinks something, or at least many don't speak against it. Not that they have incentive to remain silent, right? And they are individually smart, so it must be true. Just look at all this evidence. Ignore all the counter evidence over there, though. That's nothing. It does not apply. Predictions and closing thoughts. I am concluding these predictions to end the article because it is functional. It puts those in the group in a tough position in terms of either proving their predictions to be correct or continuing with their usual fallacies. The question is, will they opt to change their ways, or will they be content to allow these predictions to be correct and continue with their flawed methods? First of all, Laura fits the same profile as many cult leaders that have led their followers to unalive themselves. She herself had unaliving tendencies by admission, and there is an element of the apocalypse as well as not fearing but rather desiring ascension, which is possible through unaliving along with through a wave. Others have postulated she is a psychopath herself, as she had been arrested for attempted unaliving, and there are allegations involving a raffle of her house. However, I don't say not to believe Laura because of who she is, lest I be guilty of the same ad hominem fallacies I point out as irrelevant. It's the method. It's that one cannot find answers for themselves through another. It's that the forum demands submission and sacrifice of your free will. I unfortunately predict that several members of this forum and accompanying agencies will unalive themselves. I further predict that I will be declared more of a psychopath than I already was. I'm definitely going to be declared COINTELPRO, and the information in this article are going to be declared disinformation. Whatever flaws about me will be drug up as if it makes the information within the article irrelevant. On top of that, information about me will be dug up as a warning to others not to mess with Laura. In other words, if they cause me enough problems, others will learn their lessons vicariously. Then again, maybe it won't happen simply because they don't want to confirm my prophecy. My guess, considering how I met a couple of people on the forum, is that they will put personal things out there that would be considered irrelevant just because they can. It's evil. That will be justified for the good of the group. This is ponderization to a T. The irony is delicious. I could take solace in the fact that should they provide this personal attack, it will most likely succeed in showing them as the evil entity and reveal my true nature. I further predict that they will say I have it all wrong. I don't understand. I'm dumb, arrogant, uneducated, lazy, and what have you. Maybe I'm a bad writer, which I am, but a bad writer with interesting ideas. I didn't read all the Wave series. Guilty as charged. I skimmed it. I didn't give them a chance. Not true. I was going to write an article on the test either way, with them either passing or failing. You can interpret which they did. I set them up to fail. Half true. They could have also succeeded. Some say I never intended to write this article from the beginning, that I'm making the test discussion on their forum up. Of course, this goes against their own comments concerning my inquisitive behavior from the beginning. This group will question my motives, saying I'm starting my own cult, trying to sell something, feeding my ego, trying to control them, etc. They'll say I'm exaggerating certain things or misreading them. There needs to be wiggle room. Can all of it be wiggled out of? Can they change their ways to disprove this? For how long can they be changed before falling prey to similar traps? I finally predict that this may do some good. A few will read it and won't get involved. Ideally, many that are involved will test if things I say are true and begin to question. I would love for them to find their families and who they are again and embark on a true spiritual journey. A spiritual journey that is not vicarious. But wait, Laura encourages inward reflection and criticism. Isn't that personal and not vicarious? My best advice For any who admires the research done here, peer through the gates of hell and don't pass through them. For those concerned, please feel free to join the forum and convince them of their errors. Be warned that this will make you a target. In closing, I leave this message for any cult members. No one that is in a cult wants to believe they are in a cult. If they understand that they were in a cult, then they would not be in it. This article will be one of a few potential crossroads for you. Information is being presented in a clear and concise manner for your consideration. You must understand that due to time constraints, keeping your mind busy, as well as manipulative tactics, hypnosis, programming, etc., you are not thinking clearly. You'll be under the impression that I am saying false things, but be unable to explain the reasoning behind this. Try to articulate the reason. Try to do this without using the logical fallacies presented. The difficulty is a symptom. One who is enlightened does not have this confusion. While I enjoy your diligent work in terms of finding the truth, once you perceive that the methods there would cause error, then accepting this evil in the name of a greater good would become irrelevant. Forums can easily be set up, allowing those that came to this understanding to continue this research for the truth without accepting these methods. It would allow you to continue without the danger of drinking the Kool-Aid, both literally and metaphorically. The power structure is an illusion and does not need to be accepted in order to continue the group after ridding it of the fallacy mentioned here. For more information from those who have encountered this group in the past, I leave a few links for you. Please remember that disputing one of these does not dispute them all, and that this is not a cohesive effort against you, and there is nothing objective about an us versus them mentality. I am just a person who happened to come across this material and decided to investigate and then speak out. There is no motive for me to bear what I already know will be a vicious personal attack. I sell nothing. I write in my free time. This is altruism. This is your service to others. This is someone telling you to trust in yourself and not in someone else. My flaws have nothing to do with the purity of this message. It should contrast starkly with the evil you know to be within the group and forum, but is accepted. The very type of thing spoken about in political ponerology. Alright, so that's the end of this article. If you made it all the way through, you could probably see why I thought it was important to bring this one forward and read it in full. Whether you agree with every point the author makes or not, this is the kind of material that helps document what people were noticing, questioning, and reporting at that time. For me, this was one of those pieces that added more depth to the bigger picture, especially when placed alongside archived forum posts, old websites, and the experiences of people who were directly involved. And this is only the beginning. I've been digging much deeper into this story, and I've come across a much wider body of material than I expected, including archived pages, difficult to find sources, and accounts that start connecting dots in ways that are hard to ignore. So if you want to follow this investigation as it continues, please subscribe to my channel, The Confused Wanderer, hit the like button, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. And if you have information, archived material, or if you have personal experiences related to this subject, please feel free to share those in the comments. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you hopefully in the next episode.